Pencils down, class. Pencils down on the 2025 NFL trade deadline. It was a deadline day that I think you could firmly mark under the category of interesting because there wasn't a lot of movement. There weren't a huge quantity of trades made in the NFL yesterday, but some of the names moved, including, a guy like Logan Wilson getting traded from the Cincinnati Bengals. That's pretty big. And I know what you're going to say. The Bengals defense is bad. They're going to need to kind of start from the bottom up. Yeah, but you're trading away the heart of your defense. A guy that was integral to getting you to the Super Bowl not more than 5 years ago. So that starting off the day was a pretty big name to be moved. And then, of course, not as big as moving Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner if you're the New York Jets. That was absolutely wild. But overall, a fairly quiet day, a low quantity of trades made in the NFL, and certainly when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers made a grand total of 0 trades on deadline day, a day where we walked into it thinking, okay, it's finally the day. Today is the day that after almost 2 years since the Deontay Johnson trade, the Steelers are finally going to bring in a wide receiver too. And at that point, I don't think any of us cared who it was. Jakobi Meyers, yes, please bring him in. Chris Olave, beautiful, bring him in. There were some yesterday that I saw saying, well, if the Jets are doing a fire sale, maybe check in on Garrett Wilson. Just saying, maybe. I would have been perfectly fine with that. Rashid Shaheed, great, bring him in. At the end of the day, none of that came to pass. None of it. The only wide receiver move that was made on deadline day by the Steelers is finally inking Marquez Valdes-Scantling to the practice squad, something we thought had happened about a week ago. Turns out it didn't. Turns out, according to Aaron Rodgers, hey, if he wants to go try to make an active roster, I have no issues about that. Well, he didn't make an active roster. He didn't sign elsewhere. He circles back to Pittsburgh and joins them on the practice squad. So no cooking by Omar Khan. No foreshadowing by Mike Tomlin during his Tuesday presser whenever he said, I like shopping, and smirked. That wasn't foreshadowing. That's just him kind of messing with the media as he likes to do, which is sometimes funny, sometimes hurtful when you're expecting a wide receiver too to come to Pittsburgh. But personal feelings aside, the guy can make some funny jokes and can get the hopes up just for it to crash down. But this long and winding road to the Steelers finding a wide receiver too continues. And it's not like there weren't other wide receivers traded. Rashid Shaheed goes to the Seahawks, which I think is a perfect fit. Sam Darnold has been once again showing that last year wasn't a fluke with Minnesota, that he is a bona fide starting quarterback, top 10 potentially starting quarterback in this league, and he can lead a team to multiple wins. He did it last year. He's doing it this year. And then Jakobi Meyers, I think for a lot of people, myself included, the crown jewel of the trade deadline for the Steelers, the top tier wide receiver two, the prototypical wide receiver two. He goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that kind of sees the light a little bit, having a pretty decent start to the season, and the Steelers beating the Colts certainly opens the door for them to kind of climb up the ladder of the AFC South a little bit more. They needed another wide receiver. Travis Hunter goes on IR, and they go out and they get Jakobi Meyers for a 4th and a 6th. Then if you're the Steelers, I don't know if they had problems trying to trade a 4th and a 6th. I don't know if they were against it. We don't know. We never will know. But man, does it sting to see that go out the door for Jakobi Meyers, and that being kind of the missing piece of the Steelers offense. The thing that would make the Steelers offense good to great is a wide receiver too, and Jakobi Meyers fits the bill in my opinion. And it stinks that he went for a 4th and a 6th and the Steelers couldn't get it done. But I digress to that point. You can't continue to look at that. Where does that leave the Steelers? I'm leaving Marquez Valdes-Scantling out of the picture for now because he signed to the practice squad, and part of that is the Mike Tomlin way of thought, right? Narrowing road later in the season, hard for people to jump on a moving train. I'm not sure why those are the two that he uses, because you would think that the tracks are getting narrow and the train, but tracks also always stay the same. Again, I digress. So take MVS out of it, especially for this week. What that leaves the Steelers is, and this will be an oxymoron, a 3-headed quote-unquote monster at wide receiver 2. 3 names that they are going to count on each and every week, hoping at least one of them will step up into that wide receiver 2 role that given week. And that could be because of game plan. That could be just simply because it's their day. But they need, and they're hoping that one of these 3 players step up and complement DK Metcalf as the number 1 while they are the number 2 on any given week. The first name in that is Calvin Austin. He is the guy that is most frequently of the 3 stepped up and been that wide receiver 2. He's done it a couple times this season. He did it a couple times last season, and they're hoping that he continues to do it a little bit more as he continues to get further and further away from that injury that he missed several weeks with. The second name isn't even a wide receiver. It's Pat Freiermuth, a player that at the start of this season, there were some people, and rightfully so, that put him on a milk carton. Where is Pat Freiermuth? After how much Aaron Rodgers gushed about 88, he was nowhere to be found in the Steelers offense through the first several weeks of the season. Well, from the Cincinnati game onward, he's been a big part of the Steelers offense. Scored another touchdown on Sunday against the Indianapolis Colts, and he's showing just why he's getting paid that money, because he is a supremely talented pass catcher. So he's become an integral part once again to the Steelers offense. He's one of the 3 that they're hoping in any given week can step up and be wide receiver 2. And the last one's Roman Wilson. You know, maybe I'm a little bit more hopeful on Roman Wilson than most in the fan base, but I think he has it in him. And I think he's shown you over the past handful of weeks that when given opportunities, he's going to make the play. Now, he did make a boneheaded play on Sunday, fumbling the ball in I think at that point it was a 2-possession game. Whenever all you have to do is hold on to it, get the first down. Even if you don't, it'd be 3rd and 1. But all you have to do is hold on to the football. That is primary objective number 1, and he fumbled it. He tried to hurdle in the 4th quarter of a 2-score game, giving the Indianapolis Colts life. I understand that is a boneheaded play. But overall this season, when given opportunities, Roman Wilson has hit him out of the park. He's made the plays that he's needed to make, and he has just been what the Steelers had hoped he would be this season. Somebody who can just build week after week after week. And you're hoping that in the back half of the season, he establishes himself as an every weekend type of football player. Not just a, hey, maybe here you'll make some plays, here you'll just not exist. But a guy that week in and week out can be that guy. So that's the hope for the Steelers. After 2 years, it remains the same. The only difference to me being, I think these 3 players are in a much better position than any 3 players had been in that time leading up to this. Because last year it was bring in Mike Williams. Maybe he can do it. Calvin Austin, is it time? I think now you've seen these 3 players all put themselves in a position where they are in their careers ready to be that group of players that step up for the Steelers. I'm hoping I'm right. Maybe I'm a little too optimistic. You can let me know in the comments. But that brings me to a little conversation I want to have here to close out the show. The Steelers officially hit the midpoint of the season on Sunday when they defeated the Colts, advancing to 5-3. They have 8 games in. They have 9 games remaining, but they are 9 weeks in and 9 weeks remaining. So as far as time, they're at the midway point. They're 5-3, like I mentioned. They still sit in first in the AFC North, which is hard to complain about. They do have a 2-game lead on the currently surging Baltimore Ravens, which again, if you came into the season and said, hey, if I told you at the midway point of the season, the Steelers would have a 2-game lead on Baltimore, you would take it. No matter how we got here, no matter the fact that Baltimore at one point was 4 games behind or 3.5 games behind the Steelers, you would still say, I'll take a 2-game lead going into the back half of the season in the AFC North. The defense itself has been a little bit shaky. We've had highs, no higher than the game against the Cleveland Browns where they absolutely dominated and kind of looked like a top 5 unit. We've had lows, which is losing to Cincinnati and getting absolutely carved up by Joe Flacco, losing to Green Bay and not being able to make a singular stop in the second half. But overall, this has been a shaky defense that can sometimes be very good, sometimes be very bad. But at the end of the day, if they're splashy, they're good. We saw it on Sunday. They were splashy, and they continued to be a holy terror on the NFL's best offense in the Indianapolis Colts. The offense itself has been up and down. There's been some growing pains because it's still a relatively young offense, even with a 40-plus-year-old at the quarterback position. I think we're all agreeing that this offensive line is starting to take some serious strides. Troy Fautanu is becoming a beast. Broderick Jones is taking steps forward, where in years past, as the year went on, he had taken steps backward. But all in all, when you look at the Steelers offense, they are 13th in the NFL in scoring this year at just a tad over 25 points per game. I think that you need to take a step back. Remember what it looked like last year. Remember what it looked like 2 years ago and 3 years ago when this offense could barely scratch 20 points across the board on a semi-regular basis. Now they are routinely putting up 25 or more points in every single game. You'll take that if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And that takes us to what is left on the schedule. Because you enter the second half of the season, tops in the AFC North, 2-game lead on Baltimore, and a schedule that has some absolute monsters on it, but a schedule that also has a clear path to, at the very least, a 10-win season for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I understand people are getting tired of the 10-7 first round loss in the playoffs. But if 10-7 gets you a home playoff game and you win it, then 10-7 is good enough. It's all about winning your division. So we look at this schedule. Let's go game by game really quickly here. Or in my opinion, it's bucket by bucket. There's 3 buckets in the last half of the season, and it's not all even. The first bucket is the 3 games coming up. At LA on Monday night this week, versus Cincinnati back at Acrisure, and then at Chicago as Aaron Rodgers goes back to collect rent from the people that he has owned for his entire career. I think in that bucket, you should win 2 games. I think the first one should be LA, and you honestly could win 3 of these games, but you should win at least 2 of these games. At LA, both of their tackles are out. You have 2 of the best edge rushers, 3 if you include Nick Herbig, in the NFL this year. You need to take advantage. You need to get home on Justin Herbert. You need to make life a living hell for that quarterback. So at LA, I think that's a winnable game. Home against Cincinnati, if you have any pride whatsoever, you're winning that football game. You shouldn't have lost the first one on Thursday night in Cincy. You need to win that football game at home against the Bengals. And then at Chicago, yeah, the Bears are a team that are playing good football this year, but it's Aaron Rodgers versus the Bears. So you have to have, that in the back of your mind. If you're the Steelers, he should go into Chicago and play lights out because that's what he's done his entire career. So of those 3 games, I'll say you should win at least 2. You could walk away with 3, but at least 2 wins in the next 3 in that first bucket. Second bucket, versus Buffalo, woof. At Baltimore, woof. Versus Miami, there you go. And at Detroit. That is a murderer's row of matchups for the Steelers. I would say once again, in that bucket, you should win 2. You should definitely beat the Miami Dolphins. If you don't beat the Miami Dolphins, then cancel the season. But the other 3 games, versus Buffalo, at Baltimore, at Detroit, I think they should win at least 1. You shouldn't go over. You shouldn't get swept in those 3 games this season. The Steelers should be able to win one of those games, whether it's Buffalo because you get them at home. They've been a team that has been good, but also the defense has shown you that they are gettable. Baltimore's defense has been god-awful. And the Steelers versus Baltimore, it's a rivalry game. You never know what can happen. And then Detroit, I think that's a tough one for the Steelers. Detroit on the road, yeah, they lost to the Vikings, who the Steelers did beat, but also that was with J.J. McCarthy, and as I will say multiple times, it's a division matchup. You can't compare 1-to-1 a division matchup versus an interconference matchup. It just doesn't work that way. So I think in that bucket, it might be hard, but I think you win 2. I think Miami, you definitely should win, and I think you take 1 of the other 3. And that leaves 2 games in the season, 2 AFC North matchups at Cleveland, who has been out of this season since week 2 in the season, and versus Baltimore to close things out. I think you should at least win one of those games. It probably should be Cleveland at Cleveland, but again, stranger things have happened in the AFC North. With those shoulds and no flips, that's 10-7. That is 10-7. And you should be able to win the conference. Or sorry, not the conference. You should be able to win the AFC North with that, especially if you take down Baltimore on one of your two. But if you flip just one, if you win all three of the next three at LA versus Cincy, at Chicago, then you're 11-6. If you win both at Cleveland and versus Baltimore, then you're 11-6. If you flip two of them, you're 12-5 and you're swimming into the playoffs. So I think that the Steelers, with what they have now, still have the ability to win the AFC North. And that is the primary objective. Would it be nice to be a 1 seed, to get a bye, to get home field advantage through the playoffs? Yeah, it'd be nice. I just don't think that's what it sets up for the Steelers. So I'm looking at 10-7. I'm looking at 11-6. And I think that is enough to win the AFC North if you win the right football games. And if you win the AFC North, it's all you can ask right now of this Pittsburgh Steelers team that is still growing on a week-to-week basis on offense and still somehow trying to find their footing on a week-to-week basis on defense. They did so last week, and they've shown you that they can be so good on the defensive side of the football. You just have to hope that that shows up more often than not in the final 9 weeks. But that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Nick Belsky. We'll have new videos every single week pertaining to the Steelers, the Penguins. Going to start some Pirates coming up here soon, so make sure that you hit that like and that subscribe button and follow along with us as the season winds down. That's it for this video. We'll see you guys next time.